Are we really in control of our own life? What if you are told that every decision you've ever made was never truly yours to begin with? That from the moment you were born, your choices, actions, and even your deepest thoughts were already set in motion by forces beyond your control? This is the unsettling idea behind determinism. The belief that every event, including human decisions, is inevitable and caused by prior conditions. If determinism is true, then free will is just an illusion. But what if we do have the ability to make real choices? What if, at any moment, we could break free from the chains of causality and carve our own destiny? This is the argument for free will, the belief that we are in control of our own decisions. So, which is true? Are we puppets of fate, or are we authors of our own lives? Imagine you step into a time machine and travel back 20 years to observe your childhood self. You watch as little you sits at a cafe, deciding between chocolate and vanilla ice cream. From your memory, you know that your younger self will choose chocolate. So, here's the question. Did they actually have a choice? If the past is fixed, wasn't the decision already determined? And if all our past choices were inevitable, what makes the present any different? This is the core problem of determinism. If the past was set in stone, then isn't the future already written too? Determinism is the idea that everything that happens is the only thing that could have happened, because everything is caused by previous events. Think of a row of dominoes. Once the first one falls, everything else is inevitable. Determinists believe that humans are just another set of dominoes, reacting to their biology, upbringing, and environment in ways that were always bound to happen. If you grew up in a violent home, would you be destined to repeat the cycle? If you were raised in wealth, were your successes always inevitable? Could you have ever truly chosen a different path? A man commits a crime. He grew up in extreme poverty, with abusive parents and a community surrounded by violence. In court, he argues, "I never had a choice. My entire life led me here." A determinist might agree. His brain was shaped by trauma, his environment pushed him into crime, and his genetics may have influenced aggression. He was like a train on tracks, following a path laid down for him long before he even realized it. But should we accept this argument? If all his actions were predetermined, is he really responsible for his crime? Or is he simply unlucky to have been born into the wrong circumstances? This is the biggest ethical dilemma of determinism. If we aren't truly free, then how can we hold people accountable for their actions? What is free will? Free will is a belief that we are capable of making real, independent choices. It means that, despite our past and influences, we always have the power to break the cycle and choose differently. Two brothers grow up with an abusive, alcoholic father. One of them becomes an alcoholic as well. The other grows up to never drink a single drop. When asked why, the first brother says, "I drink because my father did." The second brother says, "I refuse to drink because my father did." Same past, same influences, two completely different choices. If determinism were absolute, how could this happen? This is where free will supporters argue. We always have a choice. Even in the worst circumstances, we can decide to break free from our past. But is this really proof of free will? Or is it possible that the choices we make are still shaped by subconscious factors outside of our control? Science tends to support determinism. Studies show that our genetics, brain chemistry, and environment heavily shape our actions. One shocking experiment by neuroscientist Benjamin Libet found that our brains make decisions before we are even aware of them. Using brain scans, he showed that when people decided to move their hand, the brain had already started the action before they consciously decided to do it. This suggests that our decisions might actually be determined by unconscious processes before we even realize we're making them. If true, this means our sense of free will is just a trick of the mind. But philosophers argue that even if our brains are influenced by external factors, that doesn't mean we lack choice entirely. After all, we still reflect on our actions, debate moral dilemmas, and regret past mistakes. If we were just machines following a script, why would we struggle with decisions at all? The chess grandmaster and the child. Imagine two people are playing chess. A chess grandmaster who has studied for years. A young child who barely knows the rules. When they sit down to play, both are free to make any move. But the grandmaster, with years of experience, is far more predictable than the child, because their knowledge limits their real choices. This is how many people see free will versus determinism. We may have options, but our experiences, knowledge, and subconscious biases push us towards certain choices, making some outcomes far more likely than others. Why does this debate matter? Whether free will or determinism is true has massive real-world consequences. If people don't have true free will, should we punish criminals the same way? Are people fated to be successful or unsuccessful? Or can hard work really change everything? Are we responsible for our own emotions? Or are we just responding to our brain chemistry? Even in everyday life, this debate shapes how we judge ourselves and others. If we believe in absolute free will, we might say, people just need to work harder and make better choices. If we lean towards determinism, we might say, some people are just unlucky to be born into bad circumstances. So, do we have free will? The answer may lie somewhere in the middle. Some philosophers believe that determinism and free will can coexist. They argue that even though our choices are influenced by external factors, we still have enough control to be held accountable for our actions. Imagine a river. It follows a set path shaped by rocks and land. But within that path, it still moves freely. Maybe our choices are like that, guided by circumstances, but still ours to make. But the final thought still remains. Who are you? Think about the biggest decisions in your life. The people you've loved. The dreams you've chased. The mistakes you've made. Did you truly choose them? Or were they always going to happen because of who you are, where you came from, and the infinite chain of events that led to this moment? Maybe you were meant to hear this. Or maybe, just maybe, you chose to. What do you think? Antinatalism. What if having children is the most selfish thing you can do? What if the decision to have children isn't the selfless, noble act we've always been told it is? What if, in fact, it's one of the most selfish choices a person can make? This idea might sound shocking, even offensive, but it forces us to confront the darker, more controversial side of parenthood, a side that society often ignores or dismisses. To explore this, we need to dig deep into the psychology, philosophy, and ethics of bringing new life into the world. Let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine you hold a key that can unlock the door to a new life. With this key, you can create a person who will experience the full spectrum of human existence: love, joy, wonder, but also pain, loss, and suffering. The catch? The person you create has no say in the matter. They don't get to choose whether they want to exist. The decision is entirely yours. So, would you turn the key? This question lies at the heart of a controversial psychological and philosophical debate. On one side, there's a societal narrative that having children is a natural, even noble, part of life. On the other, there's the unsettling idea that bringing a child into the world is an act of profound imposition, one that forces another being to endure the inevitable hardships of existence. To understand this perspective, we need to explore Antinatalism, a philosophy that argues against procreation. One of its most prominent voices, David Benatar, presents a compelling case in his book Better Never to Have Been. Benatar introduces the concept of an asymmetry in existence. Here's how it works. If someone is never born, they don't experience pain. This is good. They also don't experience happiness, but since they don't exist, they don't miss it. There's no deprivation. If someone is born, they inevitably suffer. Even if their life is filled with joy, they will still experience pain, loss, and ultimately death. The suffering is guaranteed. Benatar argues that the avoidance of harm outweighs the potential benefits of pleasure. In his view, creating life is fundamentally unjust because it imposes suffering on someone who had no choice in the matter. This idea challenges the very foundation of parenthood, forcing us to ask, is it ethical to bring a child into a world where suffering is inevitable? Antinatalism isn't just an abstract philosophy. It's rooted in the harsh realities of the world we live in. Think about the countless forms of suffering that exist. Poverty, illness, war, environmental collapse, and the existential dread that comes with being human. Even in the most privileged lives, there's heartbreak, anxiety, and the inevitability of death. By having children, are we not condemning them to face these realities? If antinatalism raises such compelling ethical questions, why do so many people still choose to have children? The answer lies in the complex psychology of parenthood, a mix of biological drives, societal expectations, and personal desires. 1. Biological imperatives. At its core, the drive to reproduce is rooted in biology. Evolution has hardwired us to pass on our genes, ensuring the survival of our species. This biological imperative is powerful, often overriding rational thought. But is it enough to justify bringing a new life into the world? After all, biology doesn't concern itself with ethics or the quality of life. 2. Societal expectations. Society plays a massive role in shaping our decisions about parenthood. From a young age, we're taught that having children is a natural and necessary part of life. Women, in particular, are often judged by their ability or willingness to become mothers. Those who choose not to have children are frequently labeled as selfish, unnatural, or incomplete. The societal pressure can make parenthood feel like an obligation rather than a choice. 3. Personal desires. Many people have children because they want to experience the joys of raising a family. They want to leave a legacy, to feel a sense of purpose, or to fulfill their own emotional needs. But here's the question. Are these reasons truly selfless, or are they inherently selfish? After all, the child never asked to be born. They are brought into existence to fulfill the desires of their parents. One of the most controversial aspects of parenthood is the issue of consent. When you decide to have a child, you're making a choice for someone else, a choice they can never consent to. That child will one day face pain, fear, and mortality. They'll experience heartbreak, failure, and loss. And while they may also know joy and love, the suffering is guaranteed. Is it fair to impose that on someone who had no say in the matter? This ethical dilemma becomes even more pronounced when we consider the state of the world. Climate change, political instability, and social inequality are just a few of the challenges future generations will face. By having children, are we not condemning them to inherit these problems? Are we not prioritizing our own desires over the well-being of the lives we create? While much of the focus is on the ethical implications of creating new life, we must also consider the psychological toll of parenthood, not just on the child, but on the parents themselves. The experience of pregnancy and childbirth can be incredibly traumatic, both physically and emotionally. Postpartum depression, PPD, affects approximately 10 to 15% of new mothers, yet it's often stigmatized and misunderstood. Women are expected to feel joy and fulfillment after giving birth, but the reality is far more complex. For some, the experience is marked by feelings of emptiness, anxiety, and despair. Postpartum psychosis, though rare, is even more severe. It involves hallucinations, delusions, and extreme mood swings, often leading to tragic outcomes if not treated promptly. These conditions highlight the darker side of childbirth, a side that society often ignores. Society often assumes that women have an innate ability to bond with their babies, but this isn't always the case. For some women, bonding takes time, and that's okay. But the pressure to feel an instant connection can lead to guilt and shame, further exacerbating the psychological challenges of parenthood. Parenthood often comes with a loss of identity, particularly for women. The demands of raising a child can be all-consuming, leaving little room for personal growth or self-care. This loss of self can lead to feelings of resentment, regret, and even depression. Society's obsession with parenthood is deeply ingrained. From a young age, We're taught that having children is the ultimate fulfillment of our lives. Those who choose not to have children are often seen as selfish or incomplete. But why is this the case? Why do we place so much value on procreation? Part of the answer lies in cultural and religious beliefs. Many cultures view children as a blessing, a way to carry on family traditions and values. Religion often reinforces this idea, portraying parenthood as a divine duty. But in a secular, modern world, do these beliefs still hold weight, or are they outdated relics of a bygone era? Of course, not everyone agrees with the antinatalist perspective. Many people find profound joy and meaning in parenthood. They argue that the love and connection they share with their children outweigh the inevitable suffering. They believe that life, despite its challenges, is a gift worth giving. But even this perspective raises questions. Is it fair to impose life on someone else simply because we find it meaningful? And what about the children who grow up in abusive or neglectful environments? For them, life may be more of a curse than a gift. Efilism. What if existence itself is the problem? What if life, with its inevitable suffering, is a mistake? This is the radical and unsettling premise of Efilism, a philosophy that goes beyond Antinatalism to argue that all life, not just human life, should cease to exist. It's a perspective that challenges everything we think we know about existence, morality, and the natural world. Imagine you're standing in front of a vast, intricate machine. This machine creates sentient beings capable of feeling joy, but also pain, fear, and despair. The machine operates endlessly, churning out new lives, each destined to suffer and die. You have the power to shut it down. Would you? This is the question Efilism forces us to confront. It's not just about whether we should have children. It's about whether any life should exist at all. The core of Efilism, a reverse spelling of life, is rooted in the belief that suffering is an inherent and unavoidable part of existence. While Antinatalism focuses on the ethics of human procreation, Efilism extends this argument to all sentient beings. Its proponents argue that the natural world is not the harmonious, balanced system we often imagine. Instead, it's a brutal, chaotic arena where life survives only by inflicting suffering on other life. Think about it. In nature, every living creature is either a predator or prey. Animals are born into a world where they must fight for survival, often enduring hunger, disease, and violent deaths. Even those at the top of the food chain are not spared. They, too, experience fear, loss, and the inevitability of death. From this perspective, life is not a gift, it's a sentence. Efilists argue that the only way to end this cycle of suffering is to end life itself. It's a radical idea, but one that raises profound questions about the ethics of existence. Like Antinatalism, Efilism draws heavily on David Benatar's asymmetry argument, which we touched on earlier. Here's how it applies to Efilism. If no life exists, there is no suffering. This is good. There is also no happiness, but since there is no one to experience it, there is no deprivation. If life exists, suffering is inevitable. Even if there are moments of joy, they are fleeting, while suffering is pervasive and often overwhelming. Efilists take this argument a step further, applying it not just to humans, but to all sentient beings. They argue that the absence of suffering is always preferable, even if it means the absence of happiness as well. In their view, the natural world is a cruel and indifferent place, and the only ethical choice is to prevent life from existing in the first place. To understand Efilism, we need to confront the harsh realities of the natural world. Nature is often romanticized as a place of beauty and harmony, but the truth is far darker. Consider the following: predation and violence. In the wild, animals survive by killing and eating each other. The life of a prey animal is one of constant fear and eventual violent death. Even predators are not spared. They, too, experience hunger, injury, and the struggle to survive. Disease and parasitism. Many animals suffer from diseases and parasites that cause immense pain and suffering. Think of a deer with a chronic infection or a bird infested with mites. These are not exceptions. They are part of the natural order. Environmental hardship. Life in the wild is a constant battle against the elements. Drought, famine, and natural disasters are regular occurrences, leading to widespread suffering and death. Efilists argue that these realities make life inherently unjust. By allowing life to continue, we are perpetuating a system built on suffering. The ethical implications of Efilism. Efilism raises profound ethical questions about our relationship with the natural world. If suffering is an inherent part of existence, do we have a moral obligation to end it? And if so, how far should we go? 1. The ethics of extinction. Efilism's most controversial idea is that the extinction of all sentient life would be a moral good. This is not a call for violence or destruction, but rather a recognition that the absence of life would mean the absence of suffering. It's a radical proposition, but one that forces us to confront the ethics of existence. 2. Human responsibility. Efilists argue that humans, as the most intelligent and self-aware species, have a unique responsibility to address the suffering inherent in life. This could involve reducing harm through veganism, environmental conservation, and the prevention of unnecessary suffering. However, some Efilists go further, advocating for the eventual cessation of all life. 3. The role of technology. Some Efilists believe that technology could play a role in reducing suffering, either by creating a world where suffering is minimized or by finding a way to end life peacefully and painlessly. This is a highly speculative idea, but it highlights the philosophical underpinnings of Efilism. Of course, not everyone agrees with Efilism. Many argue that life, despite its suffering, has intrinsic value. They point to the beauty, joy, and meaning that life can bring, arguing that these experiences outweigh the pain. They also question whether it's ethical to impose our own judgments about the value of life on others. But Efilists would counter that these arguments ignore the asymmetry of suffering. While joy and meaning are subjective and fleeting, suffering is universal and inevitable. In their view, the absence of suffering is always preferable, even if it means the absence of life itself. Efilism is not just a philosophical stance. It's also a deeply psychological one. To embrace Efilism is to confront the darkest aspects of existence, to acknowledge that life is not the beautiful, harmonious system we often imagine. This can be a profoundly isolating and unsettling perspective, leading to feelings of despair and nihilism. Efilism is one of the most radical and controversial philosophies in existence. It challenges us to question not just the ethics of procreation, but the very value of life itself. It forces us to confront the harsh realities of the natural world and to ask whether existence is worth the suffering it entails. Is Efilism right? That's a question without an easy answer. But what it does is force us to think deeply about the nature of existence, the ethics of life, and our responsibility to reduce suffering. Whether you agree with it or not, Efilism is a philosophy that demands to be taken seriously, because at its core, it's a question about the very meaning of life. Quietism. What if the solution to the chaos, pain, and existential dread of life isn't to fight, to change, or even to end it, but to simply stop caring? What if the most radical act of liberation is not action, but inaction? This is the essence of Quietism, a philosophy that challenges our deepest instincts to control, improve, or even understand the world. To understand Quietism, let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine you're in a room filled with endless screens, each broadcasting a different crisis: war, poverty, environmental collapse, personal suffering. The more you try to fix one, the more others demand your attention. The noise is overwhelming, the problems insurmountable. Now imagine you have the power to turn off all the screens, not to ignore the problems, but to free yourself from the burden of trying to solve them. Would you? This is the question Quietism forces us to confront. It's not about apathy or nihilism. It's about liberation from the endless cycle of striving, suffering, and despair. It's about finding peace not by changing the world, but by changing how we relate to it. The core of Quietism. Quietism is a philosophy that advocates for inner peace through detachment. It argues that much of our suffering comes from our relentless desire to control, improve, or even understand the world. By letting go of these desires, we can achieve a state of tranquility that is untouched by external chaos. At its heart, Quietism is about acceptance. It's the recognition that the world is fundamentally beyond our control, and that our attempts to change it often lead to more suffering, for ourselves and for others. Instead of fighting against the inevitable, Quietism teaches us to embrace it, to find peace in the midst of chaos. Quietism has roots in both Eastern and Western philosophy. In the West, it's often associated with the 17th century Christian mystic Miguel de Molinos, who taught that the path to spiritual perfection lay in complete surrender to God's will. Molinos argued that human effort and desire were obstacles to divine grace, and that true peace could only be found through passive acceptance. In the East, Quietism finds echoes in Taoism and Buddhism. The Taoist concept of wu-wei, often translated as effortless action, emphasizes the importance of aligning with the natural flow of the universe rather than trying to force outcomes. Similarly, Buddhism teaches that suffering arises from attachment and desire, and that liberation comes from letting go. Consider the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most famous Stoics. At the height of his power, he faced endless challenges: wars, political intrigue, personal loss. Yet, in his meditations, he wrote not of conquest or control, but of acceptance. "You have power over your mind, not outside events," he wrote. "Realize this, and you will find strength." Marcus Aurelius didn't retreat from his responsibilities, but he approached them with a quietist mindset. He recognized that much of life was beyond his control, and that his peace of mind depended not on changing the world, but on changing his relationship to it. His writings remain a testament to the power of Quietism in the face of overwhelming adversity. Case Study 2. The Zen Monk. Now imagine a Zen monk sitting in meditation amidst the chaos of a bustling monastery. Outside, the world is in turmoil. Wars rage. Economies collapse. Lives are lost. But the monk remains still, not because he doesn't care, but because he understands that his peace cannot depend on the external world. Zen Buddhism embodies Quietism in its purest form. It teaches that enlightenment comes not from striving or achieving, but from letting go of all attachments, even the attachment to enlightenment itself. The monk's stillness is not a rejection of the world, but a profound acceptance of it. The ethical dilemma lies that is Quietism selfish? Quietism is often criticized as a selfish or escapist philosophy. If we detach from the world's problems, aren't we abandoning those who suffer? Isn't it our moral responsibility to fight for justice, to alleviate suffering, to make the world a better place? Quietists would argue that this perspective misunderstands their philosophy. Quietism isn't about ignoring suffering. It's about recognizing the limits of our ability to alleviate it. By freeing ourselves from the burden of trying to fix everything, we can act with greater clarity and compassion. In this sense, Quietism is not a rejection of morality, but a redefinition of it. Quietism offers a powerful antidote to the anxiety and despair that plague modern life. In a world that constantly demands our attention and effort, Quietism teaches us to find peace not by doing more, but by doing less. It's a philosophy that speaks directly to the overwhelmed, the burnout, the disillusioned. Consider the case of a modern professional, drowning in the demands of work, family, and social obligations. The more they try to meet these demands, the more they feel like they're failing. Quietism offers them a way out, not by achieving more, but by letting go of the need to achieve at all. It's a radical shift in perspective, but one that can bring profound relief. Of course, Quietism is not without its challenges. In a world that values action and achievement, it can be difficult to embrace a philosophy of inaction. There's also the risk of Quietism becoming an excuse for passivity or indifference. Without a balance between acceptance and action, Quietism can lead to stagnation. But at its best, Quietism is not about doing nothing. It's about doing what is necessary without being consumed by the need to control or achieve. It's about finding peace in the midst of chaos and acting from a place of clarity rather than desperation. In a world that never stops shouting, quietism is the whisper that reminds us, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Utilitarianism. What if every decision you made, every action, every choice could be boiled down to a simple equation? What if the right thing to do was always the thing that produced the most happiness and the least suffering, no matter the cost? This is the provocative premise of utilitarianism, a philosophy that turns morality into a numbers game. It's a perspective that's as compelling as it is controversial, forcing us to confront the uncomfortable question: does the end always justify the means? To understand utilitarianism, let's start with a thought experiment. You're standing next to a lever that controls a runaway trolley. The trolley is barreling down the tracks toward 5 people who are tied up and unable to move. If you do nothing, the trolley will kill them. But if you pull the lever, the trolley will switch to a different track, where it will kill only 1 person. What do? This is the infamous trolley problem, and it's the perfect entry point into the world of utilitarianism. The utilitarian answer is clear. Pull the lever. Saving 5 lives at the cost of 1 is the morally correct choice because it maximizes overall happiness and minimizes suffering. But is it really that simple? And what happens when the stakes are even higher? Utilitarianism is a moral philosophy that argues the best action is the one that maximizes utility, often defined as happiness, pleasure, or well-being, while minimizing suffering. It was most famously articulated by Jeremy Bentham and later refined by John Stuart Mill. At its heart, utilitarianism is about outcomes. It doesn't care about intentions, rules, or traditions, only results. The philosophy is built on 2 key principles. The principle of utility. An action is right if it promotes happiness and wrong if it produces the opposite. The greatest happiness principle. The goal is not just any happiness, but the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism is ruthlessly practical. It doesn't deal in abstract moral ideals. It deals in cold, hard calculations. But this simplicity is also its greatest challenge. By reducing morality to a math problem, utilitarianism forces us to confront some deeply uncomfortable questions. Case Study 1. The trolley problem revisited. Let's return to the trolley problem, but with a twist. Imagine you're not standing next to a lever, but on a footbridge overlooking the tracks. The trolley is heading toward the 5 people, but this time, there's no lever. Instead, there's a large person standing next to you. If you push them onto the tracks, their body will stop the trolley, saving the 5. Do you do it? From a utilitarian perspective, the answer is the same: yes. 1 life sacrificed to save 5 is a net gain in utility. But this version of the problem makes us squirm. Why? Because it forces us to confront the human cost of our decisions. It's one thing to pull a lever. It's another to push a person. This is the dark side of utilitarianism. It can justify horrific actions if they lead to a greater good. Case Study 2. The COVID-19 pandemic. Now let's look at a real-world example. The COVID-19 pandemic. Governments around the world faced impossible choices. Lockdown saved lives by slowing the spread of the virus, but they also caused economic devastation, mental health crises, and social isolation. How do you weigh the benefits of saving lives against the costs of economic and emotional suffering? A utilitarian approach would involve calculating the total happiness and suffering caused by each option. For example, a strict lockdown might save thousands of lives, but cause widespread economic hardship. A more lenient approach might preserve the economy, but lead to more deaths. The right choice depends on which option produces the greatest net benefit. But here's the problem. How do you quantify happiness and suffering? How do you compare the value of a life to the value of a job? Utilitarianism demands answers to these questions, but the answers are rarely clear-cut. Case Study 3. The Ford Pinto Scandal. In the 1970s, Ford Motor Company faced a moral dilemma. Their Pinto model had a design flaw that made it prone to exploding in rear-end collisions. Fixing the flaw would cost $11 per car, but Ford calculated that the cost of settling lawsuits from deaths and injuries would be less than the cost of fixing the cars. So, they chose not to make the change. From a utilitarian perspective, Ford's decision might seem defensible. They weighed the costs and benefits and chose the option that minimized financial harm. But from a moral perspective, it's horrifying. The decision prioritized profits over human lives, revealing the dangers of reducing ethics to a numbers game. Now, does the end justify the means? Utilitarianism's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness: its focus on outcomes. By prioritizing the greatest good for the greatest number, it can justify actions that seem morally reprehensible. For example, sacrificing the few for the many. If killing one person could save 1,000, would it be morally acceptable? Utilitarianism says yes, but this raises troubling questions about the value of individual lives. Violating rights for the greater good. If torturing a terrorist could prevent a bomb from killing hundreds, should we do it? Utilitarianism might say yes, but this conflicts with principles of human rights and justice. Despite its challenges, utilitarianism has a powerful psychological appeal. It offers a clear, objective framework for making moral decisions. In a world filled with moral ambiguity, it provides a sense of certainty. It also aligns with our natural desire to help others and reduce suffering. But this appeal comes at a cost. By reducing morality to a calculation, utilitarianism can strip away the humanity of ethical decision-making. It can turn people into numbers, emotions into data points, and morality into a spreadsheet. Utilitarianism is not without its critics. Some argue that it's too simplistic, ignoring the complexity of human values and relationships. Others worry that it can lead to a tyranny of the majority, where the needs of the many outweigh the rights of the few. And still others point out that it's impossible to predict the long-term consequences of our actions, making the utilitarian calculation inherently flawed. But even its critics can't deny the power of utilitarianism's core idea, that morality should be about making the world a better place. It's a philosophy that challenges us to think beyond ourselves, to consider the broader impact of our actions, and to strive for the greatest good. Deontological ethics. What if lying to save a life was still morally wrong? What if stealing a loaf of bread to feed a starving child was still unethical, no matter how desperate the situation? These questions sit at the heart of deontological ethics, a moral philosophy that argues some actions are right or wrong in themselves, regardless of the outcomes they produce. To understand, let's start with a thought experiment. You are a doctor in a war-torn country. One night, soldiers arrive at your clinic, demanding to know if you are hiding enemy refugees. You are, in fact, sheltering a mother and her child in the basement. If you tell the truth, they will be executed. If you lie, you could save their lives. A consequentialist, someone who believes that the morality of an action is determined by its outcome, would argue that lying is justified because it prevents harm. But a deontologist would take a different approach. They would argue that lying is always wrong, regardless of the outcome, because truthfulness is a fundamental moral duty. For deontologists, rules matter more than results. They believe in moral absolutes, principles that must be followed under all circumstances, even when the consequences seem tragic. This philosophy was most famously championed by Immanuel Kant, an 18th century philosopher who argued that moral duties are based on reason and must apply universally. His theory is built on what he called the categorical imperative, a principle that asks, what if everyone did this? If lying were acceptable in one situation, then everyone should be able to lie whenever convenient. But if everyone lied, trust in society would collapse. Therefore, Kant concluded that lying is inherently wrong, no matter how noble the intention. Deontological ethics doesn't ask, what will happen if I do this? It asks, am I following the right principles? One of the most famous thought experiments in deontology asks us to imagine a scenario during World War II. A man is hiding Jewish families in his home when a Nazi officer knocks on the door and asks if he is sheltering anyone. A consequentialist might say, lying is justified because it saves innocent lives. A strict Kantian deontologist would say, I cannot lie because lying is always morally wrong, even if it leads to death. This is the paradox of deontological ethics. It prioritizes duty over consequences, even when that duty may lead to harm. Case study 2, the trolley problem. You're standing at a railway switch. A runaway train is about to hit 5 people tied to the tracks. You have the power to pull a lever and divert the train to another track, where it will kill only one person instead. A consequentialist would say, I must pull the lever because saving 5 lives is better than saving 1. But a deontologist might argue, I cannot intentionally take an innocent life, even if it means saving more people. The principle of not actively causing harm is more important than the numbers. Deontological ethics isn't just an abstract thought experiment. It influences many areas of our lives today. A terminally ill patient is suffering extreme pain. They beg their doctor to help them end their life. A consequentialist might say, euthanasia is justified because it reduces suffering, but a deontologist would say, a doctor's duty is to preserve life, not end it, even if the patient wants to die. Imagine a judge has the power to falsely convict an innocent person to prevent riots and chaos in a city. A consequentialist might argue, one unjust punishment is better than social collapse. But a deontologist would say, justice demands that we never punish an innocent. One of the biggest challenges today is applying deontological ethics to AI. If a self-driving car is faced with an unavoidable crash where it must either hit 1 pedestrian or swerve and hit 5 people, should the AI follow rules-based morality, never kill anyone intentionally, or outcome-based morality, minimize casualties? Ethicists are now debating how AI should be programmed. Should it follow strict moral duties? Or should it make decisions based on consequences? Deontological ethics forces us to ask, should we always follow moral rules, even when they lead to bad outcomes? Or should we sometimes bend the rules if it leads to greater good? This debate remains one of the most important in philosophy and ethics today. So, the next time you face a moral dilemma, ask yourself, are you making a decision based on duty or based on results? Would you lie to save a life? Would you sacrifice one to save many? And most importantly, would you rather be right or would you rather do good? Existential nihilism. What if everything you've ever done, everything you've ever cared about, everything you've ever loved, what if it all amounts to nothing? What if, in the grand scheme of the universe, your life is as meaningless as a speck of dust floating in an infinite void? This is the unsettling premise of existential nihilism, a philosophy that stares into the abyss and dares to say, there's nothing there. But here's the twist. What if that's not a tragedy? What if it's the ultimate liberation? To understand existential nihilism, let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine you're building a sandcastle on the beach. You spend hours shaping it, perfecting it, decorating it. But as the tide rolls in, your castle is washed away, leaving no trace. Did your effort matter? Did the castle have any lasting significance? Or was it just a fleeting moment in an uncaring universe? This is the essence of existential nihilism. It's the recognition that life, like the sandcastle, is temporary, fragile, and ultimately meaningless. But instead of despairing, nihilism invites us to embrace this truth, to find freedom in the absence of meaning. Existential nihilism is the belief that life has no inherent meaning, purpose, or value. It rejects the idea that there's any grand plan, divine order, or cosmic significance to our existence. In the words of the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who famously declared God is dead, the universe is indifferent to our struggles, our dreams, and our desires. But nihilism isn't just about despair. It's also about liberation. If nothing matters, then we're free to create our own meaning, to live our lives on our own terms. It's a philosophy that forces us to confront the void and to decide how we'll respond to it. Let's turn to the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus, as interpreted by the existentialist philosopher Albert Camus. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a hill for eternity. Every time he reached the top, the boulder would roll back down, and he'd have to start again. It's the ultimate metaphor for futility, a life of endless, meaningless labor. But Camus didn't see Sisyphus as a tragic figure. Instead, he argued that Sisyphus could find happiness by embracing the absurdity of his situation. By accepting that his struggle had no meaning, Sisyphus could free himself from the burden of expectation and find joy in the act of pushing the boulder. This is the heart of existential nihilism, the idea that we can find meaning in meaninglessness, not by denying the void, but by embracing it. Now, let's look at a modern example. The 9-to-5 worker. Every day, they wake up, go to work, come home, and repeat the cycle. They might dream of a promotion, a raise, or retirement. But deep down, they know their work is just a small cog in a vast, indifferent machine. Does their life have meaning? Or is it just a series of repetitive tasks leading to an inevitable end? From a nihilist perspective, the worker's life is inherently meaningless. But that doesn't mean it's without value. By recognizing the futility of their efforts, the worker can free themselves from the pressure to achieve, to succeed, to matter. They can find joy in the small moments. A cup of coffee, a conversation with a friend, a walk in the park. In the absence of meaning, they can create their own. Consider the artist, who spends years perfecting their craft, only to see their work ignored, forgotten, or destroyed. From a nihilist perspective, their efforts are ultimately futile. But that doesn't mean they're worthless. The artist can find meaning in the act of creation itself, in the joy of expressing themselves, in the connection they feel with their audience. Even if their work is forgotten, the process of creating it can be its own reward. One of the most common criticisms of nihilism is that it leads to moral chaos. If nothing matters, why not lie, cheat, steal, or kill? Why not indulge every selfish desire? But nihilists would argue that this misunderstands their philosophy. Nihilism isn't about rejecting morality. It's about recognizing that morality is a human construct. Just because life has no inherent meaning doesn't mean we can't create our own values, our own sense of right and wrong. In fact, nihilism can be a deeply moral philosophy. By rejecting the idea of divine or cosmic justice, it forces us to take responsibility for our actions. If there's no higher power to punish or reward us, then it's up to us to create a world we want to live in. Nihilism isn't for everyone. Some people find comfort in the idea of a higher purpose, a divine plan, or a cosmic order. For them, nihilism can feel cold, empty, and alienating. But even its critics can't deny the power of nihilism's core idea, that life is what we make of it. By rejecting the idea of inherent meaning, nihilism challenges us to create our own purpose, to live our lives on our own terms, and to find joy in the face of the void. By letting go of the need for meaning, we can find joy in the small moments, create our own values, and live our lives on our own terms. In the absence of meaning, we can find something even more precious, the freedom to be ourselves. So, the next time you feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, remember the words of the nihilist, nothing matters, and that's okay. Transhumanism. What if we could redesign humanity? What if death was optional? What if you could upgrade your body like a smartphone, swapping out old parts for new ones, enhancing your senses, boosting your intelligence, and even merging your mind with machines? This means the limits of being human are no longer limits at all. This is the radical and exhilarating vision of transhumanism, a movement that seeks to transcend the boundaries of biology and redefine what it means to be human. Imagine you're offered a pill that could double your lifespan, enhance your memory, and make you immune to disease. The catch? You'd no longer be fully human. Your body would be part machine, your mind part algorithm. Would you take it? And if you did, would you still be you? This is the question transhumanism forces us to confront. Transhumanism is a movement that advocates for the use of science and technology to enhance human capabilities and overcome biological limitations. It's rooted in the belief that humanity is not the endpoint of evolution, but a stepping stone to something greater. Transhumanists envision a future where we can extend our lifespans indefinitely, enhance our physical and cognitive abilities, merge with machines to create cyborgs, upload our consciousness into digital realms. Let's start with one of the most audacious goals of transhumanism: immortality. Companies like Calico, backed by Google, and Altos Labs are pouring billions into research aimed at reversing aging and extending human lifespans. Scientists are exploring everything from gene editing to cellular reprogramming to achieve this goal. But what would immortality mean for humanity? Imagine a world where people live for centuries or even forever. Would we become wiser, more compassionate, and more creative? Or would we stagnate, trapped in endless cycles of repetition and boredom? And what about overpopulation? If no one dies, how do we make room for new generations? Now let's look at the rise of cyborgs, humans who merge with machines to enhance their abilities. Consider Neil Harbison, a colorblind artist who implanted an antenna in his skull that allows him to hear colors. Or Elon Musk's Neuralink, which aims to create brain-computer interfaces that could one day allow us to control devices with our thoughts or even download skills directly into our brains. These technologies are not just science fiction. They're happening now. But they raise profound questions about identity and autonomy. If you enhance your brain with a computer chip, are you still you? And what happens if that chip is hacked or controlled by someone else? What if you could live on after death, not in heaven but in the cloud? Companies like Nectome and Eternime are working on technologies that could one day upload human consciousness into digital form. The idea is to create a digital afterlife where your mind could continue to exist, interact, and even evolve in a virtual world. But this raises existential questions. If your consciousness is uploaded, is it still you? Or is it just a copy? And what happens to your sense of self when your mind exists in a digital realm? Transhumanism is often criticized for its hubris. By seeking to transcend human limits, are we playing God? And if so, what are the consequences? 1. Inequality and access. If only the wealthy can afford life-extending treatments or cognitive enhancements, will we create a new class of superhumans? Will the gap between the enhanced and the unenhanced lead to a new form of inequality, one that's not just economic but biological? 2. Loss of humanity. If we enhance ourselves to the point where we're no longer recognizably human, what happens to our sense of identity and connection? Will we lose what makes us human, our flaws, our emotions, our mortality? 3. Unintended consequences. What if enhancing our intelligence or extending our lifespans leads to unforeseen problems? What if we create new forms of suffering or existential risks that we can't anticipate? Despite its challenges, transhumanism has a powerful psychological appeal. It offers hope for a future where we can overcome disease, aging, and even death. It taps into our deepest desires for freedom, growth, and transcendence. But this hope comes with a cost. By promising to transcend human limits, transhumanism forces us to confront our own fragility and mortality. It challenges us to ask, what does it mean to be human? And what are we willing to sacrifice to become something more? Transhumanism is not without its critics. Some argue that it's a form of escapism, a way to avoid confronting the realities of life and death. Others worry that it's a distraction from more pressing issues, like climate change and social inequality. And still others question whether it's even possible to achieve the goals of transhumanism. So, the next time you look in the mirror, ask yourself, what would I change? What would I keep? And what would I become if I could transcend the limits of being human? Philosophical skepticism. Everything you believe is a lie. Nothing you know about the world, about yourself, about reality itself, can ever be truly certain. What if your memories, your senses, even your thoughts were deceiving you? This is the unsettling foundation of philosophical skepticism, a school of thought that questions whether we can ever know anything with absolute certainty. It asks, how do you know the world around you is real? What if your entire life is just an illusion? Can you even trust your own mind? Imagine you wake up one morning in a perfectly realistic dream. You go about your day as usual, unaware that none of it is real. Now ask yourself, how do you know that right now isn't just another dream? Every night, you experience vivid worlds, emotions, and sensations that feel real until you wake up. So how can you ever be 100% sure that your current reality is any different? This is one of the oldest problems in philosophy, famously explored by René Descartes, the 17th century thinker who once doubted everything, even his own existence. But before we get into that, let's push skepticism even further. Imagine a scenario straight out of a sci-fi movie. You wake up one day and discover that you are nothing more than a brain floating in a jar, hooked up to a supercomputer that feeds you all your sensory experiences. Everything you've ever seen, heard, tasted, or felt was just an illusion generated by electrical impulses. Your entire life, your childhood, your loved ones, your accomplishments was never real. Now, here's the terrifying part. You can't prove that this isn't happening right now. How would you know the difference? If an advanced AI was stimulating your brain with fake experiences, it would feel exactly like real life. This is radical skepticism, the idea that our senses and perceptions can never be trusted with absolute certainty. The most extreme skeptics believe that nothing can ever be known for sure, not even basic facts like, I have two hands, or the sun will rise tomorrow. Why? Because all knowledge is based on assumptions. Your senses, they can be tricked. Your memories, they could be false. Your thoughts, they might be distorted. So if everything you rely on can be wrong, how can you ever be certain about anything? Let's explore this idea through real-world examples. Have you ever been absolutely sure about something, only to find out you were completely wrong? The Mandela effect is a phenomenon where large groups of people share false memories. Examples include, many people remember the Monopoly man wearing a monocle, but he never did. Some are called the Berenstain Bears, but it's actually spelled Berenstain Bears. People swear they remember Nelson Mandela dying in the 1980s, even though he lived until 2013. If so many people can misremember simple facts, what does this say about our own memories? A skeptic would argue, if we can be so wrong about small details, how can we trust anything we remember? Case study 2. Can you trust your senses? Look at the following statement. The sky is blue. Seems obvious, right? But is it really? In reality, the sky has no color. What we perceive as blue is just the way light scatters in the atmosphere. At sunset, the same sky appears red or orange, proving that our senses give us different versions of reality depending on conditions. Some people, like those with color blindness, don't see the sky as blue at all. If something as simple as color is subjective, how can we trust that anything we perceive is the true version of reality? This is exactly what skeptics argue. Reality isn't what we see. It's just what our brains tell us we see. The search for certainty, Descartes escaped from skepticism. One of the most famous skeptics, René Descartes, took skepticism to its extreme. He asked, what if everything I believe is false? He tried doubting everything, the physical world, his senses, even his own thoughts. But then, he realized something. Even if he doubted everything, he still had to exist in order to do the doubting. This led to his famous conclusion, cogito, ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. No matter what else was uncertain, the fact that he was thinking meant that he existed. This is where modern philosophy tries to draw the line between extreme skepticism and practical knowledge. While we may never be 100% certain about reality, we can at least be sure that we exist as thinking beings. But skeptics still push the debate further. Okay, I exist, but how do I know anything else does? Skepticism isn't just a philosophical game. It has real effects on science, society, and even politics. Science thrives on skepticism. Every theory must be tested and proven wrong before it's accepted. This is why scientific progress exists, because people constantly question what they believe to be true. Skepticism can go too far. Some people refuse to believe anything, even solid facts, because they think everything is manipulated. This leads to flat earth theories, climate change denial, and vaccine conspiracies. Small blue diamond, artificial intelligence, and reality. Also, as technology advances, we are approaching a world where deepfakes, virtual reality, and AI can completely blur the line between real and fake. Soon, we may have to ask, how do we know what's real anymore? So, can we ever be sure of anything? Maybe life is a simulation. Maybe history is a lie. Maybe you've never actually made a single real choice. Or maybe, just maybe, the fact that we ask these questions is proof that we are searching for truth. And maybe that's enough. So, next time you feel 100% certain about something, ask yourself, how do I really know this? Because what if you don't? The paradox of freedom. What if you are told that absolute freedom could destroy freedom itself? It sounds contradictory, right? After all, isn't freedom the highest ideal we strive for? The ability to do what we want, say what we want, and live how we choose? But here's the paradox. If everyone is completely free to do anything, it could lead to chaos where no one is truly free at all. This is the unsettling idea behind the paradox of freedom, the strange contradiction that too much freedom can lead to the loss of freedom itself. Let's explore this through a thought experiment. The island without rules. Imagine a group of people stranded on an island. At first they decide, we should have no rules. Everyone can do whatever they want. At first, it seems like paradise. People build homes, share food, and live peacefully. But then, one man starts taking more than his share of food. Another decides he likes someone else's house and takes it by force. A group forms, using violence to get what they want. Now, instead of everyone being free, only the strongest and most ruthless have freedom, while everyone else lives in fear. So, here's the paradox. To preserve freedom for everyone, the group realizes they need rules, limits on individual freedom to protect the collective freedom of all. This is the fundamental tension at the heart of every society. How much freedom should we give up to remain truly free? A society that values absolute free speech, where anyone can say anything, no matter how harmful. At first, this seems like the ultimate expression of liberty. But what happens when people spread violent threats without consequence? Hate groups use speech to incite riots or genocide. Lies and propaganda spread so widely that truth itself becomes meaningless. At some point, free speech without limits can destroy democracy itself. Because when misinformation and hatred dominate, people lose their ability to make informed choices. This is why most democracies place some restrictions on speech, balancing freedom with the protection of others. But where do we draw the line? And who decides? If we restrict too much, we kill freedom. If we restrict too little, we let freedom destroy itself. This is the paradox in action. Imagine this scenario. There are two cities, Libertaria and Autoritaria. Libertaria, a city with no police, no laws, and absolute freedom. Autoritaria, a city where police monitor everything, and strict laws control every action. At first, Libertaria seems like paradise, until gangs take over, crime skyrockets, and normal people are too afraid to walk outside. Meanwhile, Autoritaria has perfect order, but at the cost of total surveillance, loss of privacy, and fear of stepping out of line. So, which city is truly free? One is consumed by chaos, the other by oppression. The paradox shows us that pure freedom and pure control both lead to the same place, a world where no one is truly free. This problem has haunted thinkers for centuries. Small Blue Diamond Plato argued that unlimited freedom leads to anarchy, which inevitably leads to tyranny. Small Blue Diamond John Stuart Mill believed that personal freedom should only be limited when it harms others. Small Blue Diamond Isaiah Berlin introduced the idea of positive versus negative freedom. Negative freedom equals freedom from interference, e.g., no one controls your actions. Positive freedom equals freedom to achieve your potential, e.g., education, security, and rights enable true choice. So, why then does this paradox matter today? This is a question that shapes modern society, politics, and personal life. Should platforms allow absolute freedom of expression, even if it spreads hate or misinformation? Or should they regulate content, which could lead to censorship and loss of free thought? Should people have absolute freedom to own any weapon? Or should there be restrictions to prevent violence, at the cost of limiting personal liberty? Should children be raised with total freedom? Or do they need some restrictions to help them grow into responsible adults? Even in our personal lives, we experience this paradox. Imagine you want complete freedom from responsibility, so you quit your job, ignore all obligations, and live on your own terms. At first, it feels amazing. No rules, no restrictions, pure independence. But then, without a job, you can't afford food. Without structure, your life feels aimless. Without meaningful relationships, loneliness sets in. In seeking absolute freedom, you've lost the very things that make freedom worth having: stability, purpose, and connection. So, maybe the truth is this. Freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about finding the right limits that allow you to truly thrive. Now, another question arises: how free should we be? The paradox of freedom forces us to confront one of the hardest questions in life. How do we balance individual liberty with the need for order and protection? If we demand total freedom, we risk creating a world where the strong dominate the weak. If we demand total control, we risk building a prison of our own making. The answer isn't simple, but maybe, just maybe, true freedom is not about having no limits, but about choosing the right ones. The Hedonistic Treadmill. What if I told you that no matter how much success, money, or pleasure you achieve, you will never be permanently satisfied? Think about the last time you really wanted something: a new phone, a promotion, a dream vacation. Now, remember how excited you were when you finally got it. But then what happened? A few days, weeks, or months later, that excitement faded. The new phone became just a phone. The promotion felt normal. The vacation turned into a memory. And soon, you found yourself chasing the next thing: another upgrade, a higher salary, a new goal. Why does happiness never last? Why do we always feel like we need more? This is the hedonistic treadmill. The idea that no matter how much pleasure or success we experience, we always return to our baseline level of happiness and keep chasing more. Let's explore this through a thought experiment. The lottery winner and the accident victim. Imagine two people. Sarah wins $10 million in the lottery. Overnight, her life changes. Luxury cars, exotic vacations, financial freedom. Mark gets into a tragic accident and loses the ability to walk. His world turns upside down. Now, here's the shocking part. 1 year later, studies show that Sarah and Mark will likely be just as happy or unhappy as they were before. How is that possible? Sarah, the millionaire, adapts to her wealth. The excitement wears off, and she starts wanting even more: a bigger mansion, a private jet, an even better life. Mark, despite his loss, finds ways to adjust. Over time, he learns to find joy in new experiences, relationships, and personal growth. This is the hedonistic treadmill in action. No matter how high or low life takes us, we always return to our default state of happiness and keep chasing more. The science behind it. Psychologists have studied this for decades, and the results are fascinating. There is something they call baseline happiness. Everyone has a set point of happiness. Whether you experience extreme joy or deep suffering, you eventually return to this baseline. Small blue dime in the brain gets used to pleasure. That's why the things that once thrilled you, your first car, your first love, your first paycheck, lose their effect over time. Small blue diamond also the dopamine in the chase. The brain is wired to want, not to have. Dopamine, the pleasure chemical, spikes when we pursue something, but fades when we actually get it, pushing us to seek the next reward. This is why billionaires still want more money, celebrities still crave more fame, and people in happy relationships still dream of something better. It's not greed or ungratefulness. It's human nature. Now, this paradox affects every area of life you might not be aware of. Let's study the never-ending chase for more money. People assume that more money equals more happiness. And it's true to a point. Studies show that earning more money increases happiness, but only up to a certain point, around $75,000 to $100,000 per year. After that, extra money doesn't bring lasting happiness. A millionaire is only slightly happier than someone earning a decent salary. Yet, people keep chasing wealth, thinking just a little more will finally make them happy. Why? Because when you reach one financial goal, your expectations rise, and suddenly, what once seemed like success now feels average. This is why some of the richest people in the world still feel unsatisfied. Case study 2, the social media illusion. Social media is a perfect trap for the hedonistic treadmill. You get a few likes on your post. Exciting at first, but soon it's not enough. You start chasing hundreds of likes, then thousands. But no matter how many you get, the thrill fades. Now, you need more attention to feel the same level of satisfaction. It's never enough, because every time you reach a new level of success, your brain moves the goalpost. The same happens with fame, relationships, and even fitness goals. Nothing ever feels truly finished. If pleasure always fades, does that mean happiness is impossible? Not at all. But it does mean we need to change the way we chase happiness. The biggest mistake we make is believing that happiness is a destination, a place we'll reach and stay forever. In reality, happiness comes and goes, and that's okay. So, can we ever be truly happy? The hedonistic treadmill teaches us that happiness isn't about getting what you want. It's about wanting what you have. Chasing money won't make you happy forever. Achieving success won't erase all your problems. Even love and relationships lose their initial spark. But instead of seeing this as depressing, maybe it's liberating. Maybe happiness isn't something to reach, but something to experience in the moment again and again. So instead of running endlessly on the treadmill, ask yourself, what if happiness isn't about chasing more, but about learning to enjoy what's already here? Libertarianism. What if I told you that the government should have almost no control over your life? No restrictions on what you say. No interference in your business. No taxes funding programs you don't agree with. To many, this sounds like true freedom. To others, it sounds like chaos. This is libertarianism, a political and philosophical belief that individual freedom should come before almost everything else. Libertarians argue that the government should be as small as possible, only existing to protect individual rights, and that people should be free to live their lives however they choose, as long as they don't harm others. Sounds great in theory, but does it work in practice? Let's start with a thought experiment. The town with no rules. Imagine a small town where there are no government laws, only voluntary agreements. At first, things go well. People open businesses, make deals, and live their lives freely. If someone wants to start a business, they don't need a permit. If someone wants to build a house, no zoning laws stop them. If someone wants to carry a weapon, no government tells them otherwise. It feels like paradise until problems start creeping in. A factory opens and dumps toxic waste into the river, with no regulations who stops them. A company refuses to pay its workers fairly. Without labor laws, what can the workers do? A rich businessman buys up all the land, leaving others with nowhere to live. Is that fair? Now, people want rules, but libertarianism says less government is better. So, how do we balance freedom with fairness? Here are some of the core beliefs of libertarianism. The government's only job should be to protect people's rights, life, liberty, property. Everything else, education, healthcare, welfare, should be left to individuals or private companies. The economy should be run by private businesses, not the government. No minimum wage laws, no restrictions on business, and no government bailouts. People should be able to do whatever they want as long as they don't harm others, whether that's using drugs, owning weapons, or living however they choose. Many libertarians believe taxation is theft because it forces people to give up their money for things they may not agree with. Sounds like a world with maximum freedom, but can it really work? Libertarian ideas have been tested in real life with mixed results. In the United States, libertarian ideas have shaped policies for decades. Less government control over businesses equals more innovation, think Silicon Valley. Less restriction on speech equals one of the most open societies in the world. The right to bear arms equals personal freedom, but also high gun violence. The U.S. is one of the most libertarian-leaning countries, but even it struggles to balance freedom with order. Too much government control can lead to oppression. Too much freedom can lead to exploitation and inequality. In 2005, a group of libertarians tried an experiment. They moved to a small town in New Hampshire to create a society based on their ideals. No strict government rules. No taxes for unnecessary services. People take responsibility for their own lives. At first, things seemed to work, but soon the problems began. The town became overrun with bears because no one enforced laws about waste disposal. Richer people started buying up property and raising rents. Without tax-funded services, roads and infrastructure crumbled. Their attempt at pure libertarianism failed. Because even in a free society, some rules and protections are necessary. The libertarian paradox. Libertarianism is a double-edged sword. If the government controls too much, people lose their freedom. If the government controls too little, powerful people take advantage of the weak. The truth is, freedom isn't just about having no rules. It's about having the right rules. So, the real question is, how much government do we actually need? The repugnant conclusion. What if I told you that a world with trillions of people living just above misery might be morally better than a world with a few billion happy people? Sounds insane, right? Welcome to the repugnant conclusion, one of the most controversial ideas in moral philosophy. It comes from population ethics, a field that asks, how many people should exist for the best possible world? Is it better to have fewer happy people or many barely happy ones? What is the value of life if it's only meh but not terrible? Imagine you have the power to create a world. You have two options. A small village of 1,000 people, all living amazing, joyful lives, perfect health, deep love, endless creativity. A massive megacity with 1 trillion people, all living miserable, cramped, but barely tolerable lives. They're not suffering, but they aren't thriving either. Which world is better? Most of us would say the small village. After all, quality matters more than quantity, right? But here's where things get tricky. Philosopher Derek Parfit, who coined the repugnant conclusion, argues that if you keep adding more people, even if each one has a slightly worse life, the total happiness of the world increases. Imagine this. A world with 1 million people living in pure bliss is great. But what if we had 1 billion people? Each only 90% is happy. There's now more total happiness overall. What if we had 1 trillion people, each just barely happy, lives full of boredom, struggle, but not suffering? By this logic, the trillion-person world is better because it has more overall happiness, even though no one in it is truly happy. And this is the repugnant conclusion, that a world filled with countless lives barely worth living is, mathematically, better than a smaller world full of joy. But does that really make sense? The repugnant conclusion isn't just a weird thought experiment. It applies to real-life issues like 1. Overpopulation and resource scarcity. Should we focus on improving quality of life or maximizing the number of people who exist? Some argue that the world's population should keep growing, even if it means more poverty, because more people means more human experiences. Others argue that we should limit population growth to ensure higher quality lives for fewer people. 2. Ethics of having children. Should we have as many kids as possible because more lives equals better? Some believe every potential life is valuable and should be created. Others argue that having too many kids in a struggling world is irresponsible, especially with climate change, economic struggles, and resource depletion. If we follow the logic of the repugnant conclusion, it suggests that more people equals better, even if life is barely enjoyable. But is that really ethical? 3. Government policies and welfare. Should governments focus on making a few people really happy, high quality of life, high wealth, or try to maximize the number of people who exist, even if they live in poverty? Some policies prioritize growth at all costs, expanding economies, increasing birth rates, while others focus on quality, healthcare, education, better living standards. The repugnant conclusion challenges us to decide, is a bigger world always a better world? Most people instinctively reject the repugnant conclusion. Here's why. Adding up total happiness ignores individual suffering. A trillion lives don't make up for the loss of truly joyful lives. People aren't just numbers in a math equation. Living a meaningful, fulfilling life is different from just existing. If life is full of suffering and struggle, adding more people doesn't make the world better. It makes it worse. Even Parfit himself struggled with his own conclusion. He admitted, "I find the repugnant conclusion deeply disturbing, but I cannot prove it false. The big question here is what's the best world? If adding more people can make the world worse, then what's the ideal balance? Should we aim for a world with fewer but happier people? Should we maximize total happiness, even if it means billions of just okay lives? Or is there some middle ground? There's no easy answer. But the repugnant conclusion forces us to think deeply about the value of life itself. So, what do you think? Is a world with more people, even if they're barely happy, really better? Simulation theory. Simulation theory proposes exactly that. Our entire universe, from the tiniest subatomic particle to the vast cosmos, might be a digital construct, a hyper-realistic simulation created by a far more advanced civilization. In other words, you might be nothing more than a character in a cosmic video game. At its core, simulation theory argues that if any civilization can reach a level of technology where they can simulate entire universes with conscious beings, it's possible that they have already done so. Given that a highly advanced civilization might run countless simulations, statistically speaking, it's far more likely that we are in a simulation than in base reality. Philosopher Nick Bostrom popularized simulation theory with a simple yet profound argument. If future civilizations reach a point where they can create realistic simulations of their ancestors, they might run thousands, if not millions, of such simulations. In that case, the number of simulated realities would vastly outnumber the one base reality. Therefore, statistically speaking, it's more probable that we are living in a simulation than not. Bostrom's argument doesn't prove we're in a simulation. It simply challenges our assumptions about reality and forces us to consider that our world could be a very elaborate digital construct. Case Study 2. Consider the strange behaviors observed in quantum physics. Particles exist in multiple states until observed, reminiscent of a computer program waiting to load data when prompted by a user. Two particles instantly affect each other over vast distances, a phenomenon that seems to defy the normal flow of information, as if signals were being sent through a hidden network. Some proponents of simulation theory argue that these oddities are akin to graphical glitches in a video game. The idea is that at the smallest scales, the resolution of the simulation is breaking down, much like how pixels become visible when you zoom in too far on a digital image. Here are some practical examples. 1. The nature of physical laws. Physical constants, like the speed of light, gravitational force, etc., appear to be finely tuned for life. Some theorists suggest that these constants could be the result of programming parameters, preset values chosen by the creators of the simulation to ensure a stable, life-permitting universe. Secondly, researchers have found that the universe, when viewed at the Planck scale, might be quantized, divided into tiny, discrete units. Think of it like the pixels on a screen. The universe could be made up of bits of information, hinting at an underlying digital framework. Now, imagine trying to render an incredibly detailed video game world. At some point, even the most advanced graphics would show limits. Some scientists wonder if our universe might have similar resolution limits, small-scale irregularities, or patterns that betray the computational nature of our reality. If we accept the possibility that we're living in a simulation, what does that mean for us? It opens up a cascade of profound questions. Are our choices truly our own, or are they predetermined by the simulation's code? Is our self-awareness just an emergent property of complex algorithms? If our reality is a simulation, does that diminish its value, or could it be seen as an invitation to explore the deeper purpose behind our existence? Some find these questions deeply unsettling, while others view them as a liberating challenge to conventional wisdom. Now, let's ponder on this thought experiment. Imagine for a moment that you have access to the back door of the simulation, an interface that lets you see the raw code of your reality. What would you look for? Perhaps you'd search for signs of glitches, hints that reality is composed of data. You might even try to alter a small aspect of your world. But then, ask yourself, if you were able to change the simulation, would you lose the beauty of mystery, the wonder of discovery? In the end, simulation theory doesn't offer definitive answers. It's an invitation to embrace uncertainty and question the foundations of everything we know. Whether or not we're in a simulation, the questions it raises about free will, consciousness, and the nature of reality are worth pondering. So next time you look up at the stars, remember, what if the universe is not a timeless, infinite expanse, but a meticulously designed program running on a cosmic computer? Let that possibility wash over you as you drift into sleep, and allow your mind to wander through the endless corridors of possibility and wonder. Life as a cosmic accident. What if I told you that everything you know, your existence, the universe, the stars, even the laws of nature, might be nothing more than a grand accident? Imagine the entire cosmos as a random, unfathomable event, where life emerged not by design or purpose, but by sheer chance, a miraculous byproduct of cosmic chaos. Let's start with the very beginning, the Big Bang. About 13.8 billion years ago, our universe burst into existence in an explosion of energy and matter. This wasn't a carefully orchestrated event. It was a spontaneous outpouring of energy, a cosmic accident where random fluctuations led to the formation of galaxies, stars, and eventually planets. The intricate dance of gravity and particle physics, forces that appear finely tuned, may simply be the natural result of random processes in an indifferent universe. Some scientists marvel at the precise values of physical constants, arguing that if these numbers were even slightly different, life as we know it wouldn't exist. Yet, others suggest that we might be witnessing a cosmic accident, an emergent property of a vast, chaotic multiverse. In one universe, conditions may randomly align to support life, while in countless others, nothing of the sort occurs. Our existence, then, becomes a statistical fluke, a happy accident in an ocean of possibilities. Fast forward billions of years to our blue planet. Here, life didn't emerge because it was destined. It evolved through a series of chance events. Mutations, environmental shifts, and random survival challenges shaped the evolution of species. Practical example, the Cambrian explosion. Around 540 million years ago, life on Earth experienced a dramatic burst of diversity known as the Cambrian explosion. Suddenly, a plethora of complex organisms emerge, each uniquely adapted to its environment. This sudden proliferation wasn't part of a grand cosmic plan. It was a result of random genetic variations and environmental pressures that, by sheer accident, led to the rich tapestry of life we see today. Consider the human brain, an organ of staggering complexity. Some argue that our intelligence is a product of meticulous evolutionary design. But look closer. Random mutations, chance encounters with new challenges, and a series of unpredictable events led to the development of cognitive abilities. Our brains, with all their creativity and insight, are a cosmic accident, an emergent phenomenon from the random interplay of genetic variation and environmental necessity. So is life a cosmic accident or inevitable outcome? The notion of life as a cosmic accident challenges traditional views that see existence as the result of a predetermined plan or divine purpose. Instead, it invites us to embrace the beauty of randomness and uncertainty. Let's take a look at the butterfly effect. Imagine a butterfly flapping its wings in a far-off forest, setting off a chain of events that eventually leads to a storm on the other side of the world. In a similar way, the smallest, seemingly insignificant events in the early universe could have cascaded into the formation of galaxies, stars, and eventually life on Earth. Each tiny accident contributed to the complex, unpredictable tapestry of existence. On a smaller scale, think about the role of chance in human discovery. Many great scientific breakthroughs and inventions occurred not through a strict plan, but through unexpected accidents. Penicillin was discovered by accident when Alexander Fleming noticed mold-killing bacteria on a petri dish. Our understanding of the world often grows from these fortuitous moments, reminding us that randomness can be a powerful creative force. If life is a cosmic accident, does that mean our existence is meaningless? Not at all. In fact, there is a profound beauty in embracing the chaos of randomness. When nothing is predetermined, every moment becomes an opportunity to create your own meaning, a personal narrative woven from the unpredictable threads of chance. Without a grand design, you're free to define what matters. The absence of a predetermined purpose can be liberating. It empowers you to pursue your passions, build relationships, and leave your mark on the world, however fleeting it may be. Our lives, as accidental as they may seem, are imbued with beauty precisely because they are rare, unexpected, and unique. In conclusion, life as a cosmic accident may seem bewildering, a universe that sprang from randomness, where every star, planet, and living creature is the product of chance. Yet, it is this very randomness that makes our existence so miraculous. From the explosive birth of the cosmos to the intricate, serendipitous evolution of life, every moment is a testament to the beauty of chaos. So, as you drift off to sleep, let your mind wander through the endless possibilities of a universe without a script. Embrace the mystery, celebrate the accidental, and remember, in a cosmic accident, you are a beautiful, unexpected marvel, a rare spark of light in the vast, unpredictable darkness. Enjoy the wonder of it all, and let your dreams carry you on a journey through the beautiful chaos of existence. The red button thought experiment. What if you had a button, a single, ominous red button, sitting in front of you that could change everything? Not just your life, but the fate of everyone around you, or even the entire universe. The red button thought experiment is one of those fascinating philosophical puzzles that forces us to confront the nature of choice, power, and consequence. It asks us, what if the simple act of pressing or not pressing a button could reshape reality itself? Imagine a scenario where you are presented with a single red button. The rules are simple, yet its implications are staggering. Press the button. Your action triggers a dramatic, irreversible change in the world. Perhaps it could mean ending all suffering, or it might unleash chaos. Either way, the effects are monumental. Do not press the button. Inaction means things continue as they are, with all their imperfections, but also with the promise of future possibilities, however uncertain they may be. This seemingly straightforward decision forces you to consider what you value most. the certainty of the current state of the world, with all its suffering and beauty, or the unpredictable outcome of a radical, transformative act? Why does this thought experiment matter? 1. Choice and consequence. At its core, the red button thought experiment is about the nature of choice. When faced with a decision of such magnitude, what does it mean to truly have free will? Consider these questions. Is your choice absolute? When a single action can alter the fabric of reality, can you really control the outcome, or are you merely a pawn in a larger, predetermined system? Pressing the button symbolizes not just a personal decision, but one that affects everyone. It forces you to consider the ethical implications of wielding such power. What responsibilities come with making a choice that can determine the fate of many? 2. The illusion of control. The thought experiment also probes our belief in control. We often think that by making decisions, we steer our lives. But what if the very act of choosing the red button is an illusion that masks a universe where outcomes are predetermined, and our choices merely reveal the underlying pattern? Imagine a highly advanced computer that can predict human behavior with near-perfect accuracy. Every time you decide whether to press the red button, this machine has already predicted your action. Does your choice really matter if it can be foretold? In this scenario, the red button becomes less a symbol of free will and more a challenge to the very notion of autonomy. If your decision is foreseen, is the act of choosing truly yours? 3. Ethics and responsibility. Consider the ethical ramifications of such a decision. If pressing the button guarantees a dramatic change, be it for better or worse, how do you weigh the potential benefits against the risks? Utilitarian perspective. A utilitarian might argue that if pressing the button can maximize overall happiness or reduce suffering for the greatest number, then it should be pressed. For instance, if it could instantly cure all diseases or end all wars, the moral imperative seems clear. Deontological perspective. On the other hand, a deontologist would insist that some actions are inherently wrong, regardless of the outcome. Pressing the button could be seen as an abuse of power, a violation of the moral duty to preserve the natural order, even if the results are positive. These contrasting viewpoints force us to ask, is it ever justifiable to make a decision that could change everything, even if the potential benefits are immense? The red button forces us to confront these moral dilemmas head-on. To make the red button thought experiment more tangible, let's explore some practical examples and analogies that mirror its themes. Example 1. The nuclear launch button. Perhaps the most immediate real-world parallel is the nuclear launch button. Many world leaders have access to a button that, if pressed, could trigger catastrophic consequences on a global scale. The dilemma. The decision to launch nuclear weapons is not taken lightly. It embodies the very essence of the red button dilemma, an action that could lead to the end of human civilization. Ethical implications. The existence of such a button forces a constant balancing act between deterrence and the risk of catastrophic error. World leaders must grapple with questions of responsibility, the potential for unintended consequences, and the moral weight of holding such power. Example 2. Technological singularity. Imagine a future where artificial intelligence, AI, reaches a point of singularity, a moment when it can improve itself exponentially, leading to unpredictable changes in society. The red button in tech. In this context, the red button represents the decision to allow AI full autonomy to reshape human society. The stakes. Pressing the button could lead to revolutionary advancements that solve many of humanity's problems, or it could result in a loss of control, leading to unforeseen negative consequences. Ethical dilemma. Similar to the nuclear example, the decision involves immense risk. The technology could either usher in a utopian era or create a dystopia where humans become subservient to machines. For many, the idea of the red button is not just an abstract thought experiment. It reflects the real burden of decision-making in our lives. In our daily lives, we often face choices that, while not as dramatic as altering the course of the universe, still carry significant weight. Deciding whether to forgive a friend, to commit to a relationship, or to take a risk in love can feel like pressing a red button. These choices shape our future, sometimes in irreversible ways. Choosing a new job, starting a business, or pursuing a passion, each of these decisions carries the potential for both tremendous success and profound failure. In each case, the red button is symbolic of the pivotal moments that define who we are. The thought experiment reminds us that while we may sometimes feel overwhelmed by the power of choice, these decisions are what make life dynamic and unpredictable. In our increasingly digital world, the red button takes on new meaning. With advancements in artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and global connectivity, we are approaching moments where a single decision, much like pressing a red button, could radically transform society. Imagine an AI system that controls critical infrastructure, from power grids to transportation networks. The decision to implement such a system might be likened to a red button. The promise: an AI could optimize efficiency, reduce human error, and improve overall quality of life. The risk: however, if the system were to malfunction or be misused, the consequences could be catastrophic, disrupting entire economies or even endangering lives. Ethical considerations: decision-makers must weigh the immense benefits against the potential risks, questioning whether humanity is ready to hand over such power. This modern dilemma mirrors the red button experiment, highlighting the ongoing tension between innovation and responsibility. At its heart, the red button thought experiment is an invitation to embrace uncertainty and acknowledge the limits of our control. It challenges us to accept that, despite our best efforts, some aspects of life and the universe remain beyond our grasp. While the idea of having such immense power may seem overwhelming, there is also a sense of liberation in recognizing that not everything is predetermined or controllable. Embracing uncertainty allows us to live more fully in the present, cherishing the small, everyday choices that define our lives without being paralyzed by the fear of a single, momentous decision. Take a moment to reflect on the power you hold in your own life. Every choice, no matter how small, is a testament to your agency in an unpredictable universe. The red button reminds us that while we may not have the power to control everything, we do have the power to choose, and that choice is, in itself, a beautiful mystery. The problem of suffering. What if the very essence of existence is defined by suffering? You wake up each day knowing that pain, loss, and hardship are not anomalies, but integral parts of the human experience. The problem of suffering is one of the oldest and most persistent philosophical dilemmas. It forces us to ask, why is there so much pain in a world that also has beauty? And more profoundly, can we find meaning in the midst of suffering? Suffering is not just physical pain or emotional distress. It is the experience of life's inherent struggles. It manifests in the form of illness, loss, heartbreak, failure, and even the mundane frustrations of daily existence. At its core, suffering is a universal experience that touches every human life, regardless of background or belief. Historically, the problem of suffering has been a central question in many philosophical and religious traditions. In Western philosophy, thinkers like Arthur Schopenhauer argued that life is dominated by an endless cycle of desire and dissatisfaction, an existence where suffering is inevitable because our cravings can never be fully satisfied. In Eastern thought, Buddhism directly addresses suffering with the concept of dukkha, teaching that suffering arises from attachment and desire, and that liberation comes from transcending these attachments. Each tradition offers its own answer to why we suffer and how we might alleviate it. Yet the mystery remains. Is suffering a punishment, a test, or simply a byproduct of a chaotic universe? And if suffering is unavoidable, can we transform it into something meaningful? To fully grasp the problem of suffering, it helps to look at its various dimensions and how they play out in real life. Physical pain is the most tangible form of suffering. It is the pain of illness, injury, and the deterioration of the body over time. Consider the struggles of those facing terminal illnesses or chronic conditions. Their suffering is not just about the pain itself, but the loss of control, the erosion of independence, and the deep existential anxiety that accompanies the awareness of mortality. Imagine a patient diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer. Beyond the physical pain of the disease and its treatments, this person experiences emotional and psychological suffering. The fear of death, the sorrow of leaving loved ones, and the existential crisis of wondering if life has any lasting meaning. Palliative care aims not only to relieve physical pain, but also to address these deeper layers of suffering, providing comfort and dignity in the face of the inevitable. 2. Emotional and psychological suffering. Emotional suffering can be just as crippling as physical pain. Heartbreak, grief, and depression are experiences that can shatter our sense of self and disrupt our ability to engage with the world. When relationships end or when we lose someone we love, the emotional void can feel overwhelming, a reminder of our vulnerability. 3. Existential suffering. Existential suffering arises from the fundamental questions of meaning and purpose. Even when our basic needs are met and physical or emotional pain is minimized, many of us grapple with a sense of emptiness or the fear that life lacks inherent meaning. This type of suffering is less about external circumstances and more about the inner landscape of the mind. Many people in their middle years experience an existential crisis, a period of intense self-reflection, doubt, and the feeling that they have not lived up to their potential. This crisis is not simply a reaction to aging, but a confrontation with the realization that time is finite and that the grand narrative of one's life may be falling short of expectations. While painful, these moments can also spark a deep reevaluation of values, leading to personal growth and a renewed sense of purpose. 4. Collective and societal suffering. Beyond the individual, suffering also has a collective dimension. Wars, natural disasters, systemic injustice, and economic crises inflict pain on entire communities. Such suffering often leaves scars that persist for generations and challenges us to address not just the symptoms, but the underlying causes. If suffering is so pervasive, one might ask, why does it exist? Philosophers and theologians have long debated this question, and several perspectives have emerged. Some argue that suffering is an unavoidable aspect of existence, an inescapable consequence of life's inherent impermanence and change. In this view, suffering is not a punishment, but a natural condition. Life, with all its beauty and joy, is also marked by loss, pain, and the fleeting nature of our experiences. The ancient Stoics believed that suffering arises from our attachment to things we cannot control. By cultivating inner resilience and accepting the transitory nature of life, we can learn to endure suffering and even find serenity amidst the chaos. Another perspective suggests that suffering, while painful, can be transformative. It is through adversity that we often learn the most about ourselves, develop empathy, and gain a deeper appreciation for life's fragility. Suffering can be a teacher, guiding us toward a more profound understanding of what it means to be human. The theological conundrum. In many religious traditions, the existence of suffering poses a significant challenge to the notion of a benevolent, all-powerful deity. If a loving God exists, why is there so much pain in the world? This question, known as the problem of evil, has led to a variety of responses. Some theologians argue that suffering is a consequence of free will. To create beings capable of genuine love and moral choice, God granted humans the freedom to choose, even if that choice leads to evil and suffering. Others suggest that suffering is a means of spiritual development, a way for souls to grow, learn, and ultimately become more aligned with divine goodness. In this view, the hardships of life are not meaningless but serve a higher, albeit mysterious, purpose. While these theological explanations may not satisfy everyone, they offer a framework for understanding why a loving God might allow suffering, and how, in some cases, pain might lead to greater spiritual and moral growth. How we perceive suffering can dramatically influence its impact on our lives. Two individuals might experience the same hardship, yet their responses can be vastly different based on their mindset. Mindset matters. A person with a growth mindset sees challenges and suffering as opportunities to learn and evolve. They understand that pain is a temporary part of life and that overcoming adversity can lead to personal transformation. Conversely, a fixed mindset might interpret suffering as a sign of inherent inadequacy, leading to despair and stagnation. Studies in positive psychology have shown that practicing gratitude can significantly reduce the perceived intensity of suffering. By focusing on what remains good and meaningful, even in the midst of pain, we can reframe our experience and build resilience. Here is a practical example. Imagine two individuals who have both lost a close family member. One plunges into despair, overwhelmed by grief and unable to see a way forward. The other, while deeply saddened, begins to reflect on the cherished memories and the love that defined their relationship. Over time, this person channels their grief into creative expression, writing, art, or community work, transforming their loss into a source of strength and connection. Here, the difference lies not in the objective reality of the loss, but in the subjective interpretation and response to suffering. If suffering is inevitable, what can we do with it? Rather than simply trying to eliminate pain, many philosophers and thinkers suggest that we can transform suffering into something meaningful. Art, literature, and music have long been powerful mediums through which humans express and process suffering. The works of poets like Rumi, novelists like Dostoevsky, and musicians across genres capture the raw, unfiltered emotion of human pain, and in doing so, they offer solace and understanding. Consider how communities use storytelling as a way to cope with collective trauma. After devastating events, whether natural disasters or acts of violence, survivors often share their experiences through art and narrative. These stories not only validate their suffering, but also create a shared sense of resilience and hope. By externalizing their pain, individuals can begin to process it, connect with others, and ultimately find meaning in their struggle. Practical example is the mindfulness-based stress reduction MBSR. Developed by John Kabat-Zinn, MBSR is a program that uses mindfulness meditation to help individuals cope with chronic pain, anxiety, and stress. Participants learn to focus on the present moment, acknowledging their pain without becoming overwhelmed by it. Over time, this practice can lead to a deeper understanding of the nature of suffering and a greater capacity to live with it peacefully. The problem of suffering is perhaps one of the most profound challenges of human existence. It forces us to confront the reality that pain, physical, emotional, and existential, is woven into the fabric of our lives. Yet, within this pain lies the potential for transformation, growth, and a deeper understanding of what it means to be human. As you reflect on the nature of suffering, consider that it is not merely an enemy to be vanquished, but a complex, multifaceted phenomenon that invites us to grow. From the harsh realities of terminal illness and personal loss to the collective tragedies that reshape entire communities, suffering is both an individual and shared experience, a call to empathy, resilience, and introspection. So, as you continue your journey through life, let the reality of suffering be a reminder that even in the midst of pain, there is the potential for profound meaning. Every challenge you face, every setback you endure, can be transformed into a stepping stone towards a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. Absurdism. What if you spent your entire life searching for a purpose, only to realize that the universe doesn't care? Imagine a constant tug-of-war between your inner need for meaning and the indifferent, chaotic world around you. This is the essence of absurdism, a philosophy that confronts the inherent conflict between our desire for clarity and the universe's stubborn refusal to provide it. At its core, absurdism asks us to face a simple yet unsettling truth. Our search for meaning in life is inherently absurd because the universe is indifferent to our hopes, dreams, and struggles. The absurd dilemma. We crave answers. Why are we here? What's our purpose? Yet the cosmos offers no grand, inherent meaning. The human experience. Every day, we try to impose order on the chaos. We create routines, build relationships, and pursue goals. But no matter how much we strive, the universe remains indifferent, leaving us to wrestle with our own existential questions. Consider the famous essay by Albert Camus, The Myth of Sisyphus. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus is condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, only to watch it roll back down every time he nears the top. Camus saw Sisyphus as a symbol for the human condition, endlessly striving for meaning, only to be met with the futility of our efforts. The twist here is that rather than despair, Camus suggests that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, the act of rebellion, acknowledging the absurdity of life while continuing to live passionately, is itself a triumph. This thought experiment teaches us that even in a life devoid of cosmic meaning, we can find value in our actions and experiences. Practical examples in our daily life. 1. The routine of modern life. Morning rituals. Every morning you wake up, brush your teeth, and commute to work. These actions may seem trivial, yet they structure your day. The absurd twist. On one hand, this routine can feel monotonous and meaningless. On the other, it provides comfort and stability, an oasis in an otherwise indifferent world. The lesson: absurdism invites us to find joy in these small rituals. Instead of lamenting the lack of grand purpose, we learn to appreciate the beauty in our daily routines. 2. The pursuit of happiness. Material success. Society often tells us that accumulating wealth or achieving fame will give life meaning. The reality check. Yet, even the most successful individuals can feel a persistent emptiness, a sense that something is missing. The absurd response. Recognizing this, absurdism encourages us to reject the notion that external achievements provide ultimate fulfillment. Instead, it suggests that true freedom comes from embracing the uncertainty and unpredictability of life. 3. Art and creativity. Creative expression. Artists, writers, and musicians often channel the absurdity of existence into their work. The impact. When you listen to a haunting melody or gaze at a surreal painting, you might sense the tension between order and chaos. The message. This creative expression is a way to confront and celebrate the absurd. It transforms existential angst into beauty, suggesting that even a meaningless universe can inspire profound, moving art. Absurdism doesn't demand resignation. Rather, it challenges us to live with passion despite, or perhaps because of, the inherent meaninglessness of life. The choice. We can either fall into despair by acknowledging the absurd, or we can choose to rebel against it by creating our own meaning. The empowerment. By accepting that the universe may offer no grand answers, we are free to define our own purpose. Every moment, every decision, becomes an act of defiance, a personal victory in the face of cosmic indifference. Imagine standing on a busy street, feeling overwhelmed by the endless stream of people, noise, and movement. In that moment, you have two choices: to succumb to the chaos or to dance in it, finding your own rhythm amidst the disarray. Absurdism invites you to choose the latter, celebrating your unique existence even if the universe itself is silent on the matter. Absurdism is not a call to nihilism or despair. It's an invitation to live authentically in a world that may not provide inherent meaning. By accepting the absurdity of our existence, we can liberate ourselves from the pressure to find ultimate answers and instead focus on the beauty of our fleeting, individual experiences. So, as you ponder these ideas tonight, ask yourself, will you allow the chaos of an indifferent universe to overwhelm you, or will you boldly create your own meaning and dance in the face of the absurd? Let this thought guide you into a reflective, peaceful sleep, where the mystery of existence becomes a lullaby, gently rocking you into dreams of possibility and wonder. Misanthropy in philosophy. What if humanity itself is a problem? What if everything you hold dear about humanity, our capacity for kindness, our progress, our hope, is nothing more than an illusion? What if deep down, the very essence of human nature is riddled with flaws that make us inherently destructive and self-serving? This is the provocative territory of philosophical misanthropy, the view that, despite our potential for greatness, humanity as a whole is fundamentally flawed. At its core, misanthropy is a dislike, distrust, or outright contempt for humankind. In philosophy, Misanthropy isn't simply a personal bias or a momentary feeling of frustration. It's a comprehensive critique of human nature. Philosophical misanthropes argue that human beings, with all our intelligence and achievements, are prone to greed, cruelty, and irrationality. They believe that the collective behavior of humanity often leads to more harm than good, whether it's environmental degradation, social injustice, or the perpetual cycle of violence. But don't get us wrong. Philosophical misanthropy isn't about hating every individual. It's about questioning the very foundations of our collective actions and the systems that have evolved around us. It challenges the optimistic belief that human nature is essentially good or that progress will inevitably lead to a better society. The roots of misanthropy can be traced back to ancient times. Think of the cynics of ancient Greece, who scorned societal conventions and believed that civilization corrupted our natural virtue. Later, in the 18th and 19th centuries, philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer painted a bleak picture of human existence, arguing that life is dominated by suffering and that our desires only lead to perpetual dissatisfaction. Schopenhauer's perspective was deeply pessimistic. He saw human beings as driven by insatiable will and endless striving, a process that leads to suffering rather than fulfillment. In his view, our pursuits, be it wealth, power, or even art, are ultimately futile in the face of a world that seems predisposed to pain. Fast forward to the modern era, and you find thinkers like Christopher Hitchens and other outspoken critics who, while not always labeling themselves as misanthropes, have often expressed a deep disillusionment with human behavior. They point to wars, political corruption, and environmental destruction as evidence that, left to our own devices, humans will often choose the path of least compassion and most selfish gain. Let's explore some real-world scenarios that illustrate the misanthropic critique of humanity. Case Study 1. The Corporate Greed Machine. Imagine a major corporation that touts innovation and progress, yet behind its glossy marketing and impressive stock prices lies a darker story of exploitation. Workers in factories across the globe are subjected to unsafe conditions. Child labor is prevalent, and environmental regulations are flouted in pursuit of profit. Misanthropic perspective. A misanthrope might argue that this isn't an aberration or the actions of a few rogue companies. It's inherent in the way modern capitalism operates. When profit is the ultimate goal, the well-being of people and the planet becomes a secondary concern. Practical example. Consider the case of fast fashion. Brands that offer trendy clothing at low prices often rely on sweatshops where labor is cheap and environmental degradation is rampant. Despite growing awareness and consumer advocacy, the system persists because it's built on a fundamental assumption that human greed and the relentless pursuit of wealth are natural and inescapable. This scenario illustrates a key misanthropic idea. Humanity's collective drive for material gain leads to systemic harm, and no amount of individual goodwill can counteract the overarching forces at play. Case Study 2. The Political Arena and the Illusion of Democracy. Think about the political systems that many of us hold in high regard. Democracies that promise freedom, equality, and justice. Yet, in practice, political campaigns are riddled with lies, manipulations, and the influence of money. The average citizen often finds themselves disillusioned, feeling that their vote is a mere drop in a corrupt ocean. Misanthropic perspective. From a misanthropic viewpoint, this isn't just a case of a few bad actors in politics. It's evidence of a deeper flaw in human nature. The desire for power and control can corrupt even the best-intentioned individuals, leading to a cycle of deception and exploitation. Practical example. Consider the phenomenon of political polarization. Social media and modern communication have amplified extreme viewpoints, while nuanced discussions are drowned out. The result? A fragmented society where empathy and rational debate are sacrificed at the altar of partisan loyalty. Here, misanthropy sees a reflection of a more profound truth. Humans are prone to tribalism, preferring the comfort of echo chambers over the challenge of critical engagement. Why embrace misanthropy? Now, you might be wondering, is it really useful or even ethical to adopt a misanthropic stance? After all, If we despise humanity, what hope is there for change? For some, misanthropy is a call to radical honesty. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our collective behavior. By recognizing that human nature is riddled with flaws, we can demand systemic change. Instead of placing blind faith in the promise of progress, we can push for reforms that address the root causes of our societal ills. Cultivate personal responsibility. If we accept that the world is not inherently good, we might be more inclined to act ethically and responsibly on an individual level, rather than relying on collective morality to save us. The challenge is to balance a critical perspective on humanity with a recognition of its potential for goodness. While philosophical misanthropy invites us to scrutinize our collective failings, it can also serve as a catalyst for change. If we use our insights to build better systems, rather than resigning ourselves to pessimism, rather than a call to hate. Many philosophers view misanthropy as a wake-up call, a way to shake off the complacency that comes from assuming that human progress is inevitable. It's a reminder that we must constantly question our social, political, and economic structures. True progress requires acknowledging our limitations and working actively to overcome them. The future isn't predetermined by our current flaws. If we are aware of them, we might have a chance to change. Take, for instance, the environmental movement. The stark misanthropic view of human greed and disregard for nature has spurred many activists to push for radical reforms, like stricter regulations on pollution and a reevaluation of our consumption habits. While misanthropy paints a grim picture, it can also ignite the passion needed to fight for a better world. Can we love humanity despite its flaws? Misanthropy in philosophy is a powerful, often unsettling perspective. It challenges us to look at the darker sides of human nature, our capacity for violence, greed, and hypocrisy. It forces us to ask hard questions. Is our collective behavior a product of inescapable human flaws? Can we ever transcend the destructive impulses that seem to be woven into our very nature? While these questions can be disheartening, they also offer a unique opportunity. By acknowledging our shortcomings, we create space for genuine change. Rather than being paralyzed by the negative, we can choose to confront it, transforming misanthropic insights into a call for more thoughtful, compassionate action. Next time you feel frustrated by the news, disillusioned by politics, or disheartened by the state of the world, remember, the critique isn't a death knell for humanity. It's a mirror urging us to do better. So, what if instead of succumbing to misanthropy, we let it motivate us? What if we use its lessons to build a society where we recognize our flaws and work tirelessly to overcome them? That's a challenge worth considering. One that asks us to be both honest about the human condition and bold in our pursuit of a better future. Kindly subscribe to our YouTube channel to join a community of like-minded people who enjoy falling asleep to thoughtful content. Thank you for listening.